Thanks, Kathy, for the opportunity to share some of what I've learned as a citizen of Naperville, who started out just asking questions about our power supply and then driving down to Springfield to attend IMEA board meetings. And now Howard Salk and I are leading the Clean Energy Alliance of Naperville, which is a small organization focused on that citizen political will that we need in order to complement what Nest and others are doing to move us to clean energy. So let's see if all right, okay. So we're gonna do a drinking from the fire hose pace as we have only 30 minutes here. Kathy was tough on me here. A copy of the slides is included in the further resources link that I'll share at the end. I'm gonna trust your reading eyes to move much faster than my spoken words so that we can have time at the end for questions here. So 10 slides to cover it all. All right, Naperville is a municipal electric utility. The city of Naperville owns and operates its own electric utility that serves over 60,000 customers in our city, unlike our neighbors who are served primarily by ComEd. So unlike those investor-owned utilities, ComEd and Ameren, Illinois, and downstate, the Naperville electric utility is vertically integrated, meaning that it's responsible for the entire range from power supply to delivery, service, and billing for all of its customers. ComEd and Ameren were split apart from their power generation assets by the 1997 Illinois Rate Relief Law. So that's why we have Exelon, one of the Exelon companies owning the nukes, but ComEd no longer owns the nukes. Also very much different than ComEd and Ameren, Naperville and the other 40 Illinois municipal electric utilities, munis, as well as the 25 rural electric co-ops, are exempted from the provisions of the Illinois Public Utilities Act. So here's a copy paste of that language from the Illinois Public Utilities Act that shows you just how the munis and co-ops are not included in the subsequent provisions of this act. And that includes also the amendments to the act that came from the recently passed Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. Same for FEJA. You know, those amendments of FEJA that applied to the Public Utility Act did not apply to Naperville. So in my senior brain, it's pretty ironic that the most public of the public utilities are excluded from our Illinois Public Utilities Act. So what's that mean? It means that what's the exclusion mean? We don't have a choice of alternative suppliers like ComEd customers have. We have no oversight protections of the Illinois Commerce Commission, nor do we have the help of the Citizens Utility Board. By charter, they only can focus on the investor-owned utilities. We don't financially contribute to keeping the Illinois zero emissions nuclear fleet from shutting down, nor do we financially contribute to the Renewable Portfolio Standard Fund that pays for the solar incentives that our Naperville solar homeowners and businesses who run solar, they receive. We have no legislated goals for renewable energy, and we make our own local solar rules, including that prohibition of power purchase agreements, PPAs, that our schools and nonprofits need to deploy solar. Ultimately, what it means is that our city council is ultimately responsible for serving as the board of directors of our electric utility. We have no one else to turn to. So let's jump to IMEA now. Everybody's heard IMEA. So where does IMEA fit in? The Illinois Municipal Power Agency. It's a joint municipal power agency that allowed Naperville to join with other munis to jointly finance, plan, own, and operate power supply resources. And so what that means is that we, Naperville, and the other 31 muni members are IMEA. So it's not they and us, it's we are IMEA. And don't forget this, we are IMEA. I'll come back to that. So let's look at our power supply resources that we have through IMEA. Nearly 70% of our electricity comes from our co-ownership of coal-fired generation in Prairie State Energy Campus and the Trimble County, Kentucky coal plant. Okay, so it's ownership. It's not just a contract. We own it. 21% also comes from a contract with the Vistra coal plant that we've learned ends next year. Many of you have probably heard that Vistra is trying to get out of Illinois, shut down their coal plants and get out of Illinois. 10-ish% comes from wind, hydro, and solar generators. And I want to make a comment about this right now because we have no publicly documented goals and plans from either IMEA or Naperville on transitioning to further clean energy resources or for addressing our coal-fired ownership. We don't know what the plans are. And just from our coal-fired ownership alone, we are more than double the Illinois average in CO2e emissions. So you can see that the state average is 725 pounds of CO2e per megawatt hour. The weighted average just from PSEC and Trimble for us puts us double the Illinois average. And Dr. Rob Sargis always reminds me not to forget the particulate emissions and the groundwater contamination from those coal plants that are cause of death and illness. Coming back to IMEA, I suggest that everyone think of Naperville as both a co-owner, like a shareholder of IMEA, as well as an outsourcing customer of IMEA for the power supply side of Naperville's electric utility business. If you remember that I said Naperville is a vertically integrated utility, but they've taken the half that's the power supply side and they've outsourced it completely over to IMEA. So Naperville's the largest member of IMEA. We represent 35% of the power consumption as well as the capacity. So you see the number here. It's 1.3 billion kilowatt hours. And we pay IMEA over 110 million, over 100 million a year. Many don't know or aren't aware that Naperville was actually a founding member of IMEA all the way back in 1984. And in the history, you can in our Google Drive, I've put a copy of an IMEA Integrated Resources Plan report from 2002 and some past board meeting records, which show us clearly suggesting that Naperville actively participated with IMEA leadership and the other IMEA members to plan to buy a share of Prairie State so that IMEA could start supplying the northern municipal electric utilities here. In my opinion, we can't forget, it's important for us to remember that there's a long history, there's a long-standing trust relationship between IMEA and Naperville leaders. IMEA's leadership folks are considered the trusted experts and thought leaders when it comes to power supply. We signed our IMEA contract in 2007 to start buying power in 2011. I believe that was the year that Prairie State was expected to come online. The contract expires in 2035 with 5 years advance notice. Important to remember that contract termination does not end our co-ownership, okay? And we believe that there's no prenup agreement, if you want to use that term prenup, so trying to divorce from that ownership will likely be something that's only lucrative for the lawyers in terms of trying to unwind from that ownership. We and all the IMEA members have full requirement contracts, which means we must buy all our power supply needs from IMEA. In fiscal year 2019-2020, in June of 2019, we first learned of plans for IMEA to extend member contracts, which I believe we were successful in slowing down or maybe temporarily pausing because NEST actually made comments at the November 19th board meeting regarding that, okay? Also someone down in Highland, Illinois, Gene Cordy, who I've worked with extensively on IMEA issues, she got IMEA, or Highland, Illinois, to voice concerns about that too. But in my opinion right now, we should expect that the Vistra power supply contract termination is now stirring contract extension plans once again, as I believe that IMEA is dangling a relatively small amount of additional renewables in exchange for member contract extensions. But at the same time, they're not documenting any plans to address or reduce that coal-fired ownership. Let me mention a little bit about the IMEA board meetings. They are public, so IMEA is a public body of Illinois government. So the executive board and the board of director meetings in Springfield are open to the public. I used to have to drive there, but now they're on GoToWebinar, so you can attend them remotely. I don't expect that that's going to continue once the pandemic declaration is over, because I don't think IMEA is real interested in making them so transparent. But we'll see. Copies of the records, all the meeting records, the agendas, the slides, the minutes. I put a copy of them into our Nest IMEA board meetings directory, and there's a link to that in the further resources at the end, okay? It's important to know that IMEA aggressively uses exemptions in the Open Meetings Act and the FOIA statutes to restrict our public transparency on power supply resources and plans. That's why we don't know the details about contracts and we don't know about plans, because they keep them hidden from us. And a key example of that is that the minutes of the November 6th and 7th, 2019 planning meetings, they are still not released to the public. Periodically, I think it's every 6 months, IMEA members vote again to extend not releasing those minutes here. So there's an intentional effort to keep that planning out of the public eyes. Let's now look at the Prairie State Energy Campus here. Almost half of our power supply comes from Prairie State, okay? And it is the largest coal plant in Illinois, the largest direct emitter of greenhouse gases in Illinois, one of the top 10 in the country here. Here's the number of CO2e per US EPA eGrid numbers here. You know, you can see that. That's 13 million tons of CO2e. And how much power that plant is generating? There you have 11 million megawatt hours. What's interesting to note that the RMI report even pointed out that even though it's presented as a cleaner power plant, a cleaner coal-fired generator here, its rate of CO2 emissions was even higher than other coal plants in many cases here. So even though it was supposedly cleaner, more CO2e per megawatt. So PSEC is owned by 9 public power entities, which are peers of IMEA. Another 3 of them are in Illinois. So Bill Kale's here from Geneva. Geneva's part of of NIMPA, Northern Illinois Municipal Power Agency. So NIMPA includes Batavia, Geneva, and Rochelle. IMEA includes 32 members in Illinois. There are 2 downstate what are called generation and transmission co-ops, Southern Illinois Power Company and Prairie Power, that have rural co-op members. So they're the 4 of the 9 that are headquartered in Illinois. The other 5 are out of state. And there's a total of over 300 members tied to Prairie State. IMEA owns a 15% share. Our Naperville energy usage is roughly 5% of Prairie State. And I believe that puts us in the top 3 consumers of Prairie State in the country here. And very important to know is that there's a PSEC confidentiality agreement that's inside the owner's participation agreement. And that confidentiality agreement keeps us from being able to see the PSEC financials. We don't get to see the budgets. We don't get to see forecasts. We don't get to see operating reports, all that stuff. Even though the 9 owners represent public power entities, PSEC is PSEC is one of the least transparent of the generating plants. It's crazy, but that's the way it is. PSEC is hugely important to that economic base downstate, or perceived to be here. So it has 400 mine workers, 200 plant workers, and hugely important to the tax base of Marissa, which is a city right next to it, Washington County and surrounding communities here. It is perceived to be hugely important to the downstate economy, and its supporters have a huge political influence in downstate Illinois and the state capital here. So as an example of that, the recently passed CEJA, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, requires the investor-owned utilities to close by 2030. But PSEC was almost completely untouched, but at the last minute, I think the Clean Jobs Coalition folks were able to get at least a date put in there for Prairie State, but it's effectively untouched until 2038. And then if in 2038, it hasn't reached a 45% CO2e reduction, then it's forced to turn off one of its 2 generators here. So it would operate at half capacity all the way until 2045. How will it reduce its CO2e? There is a carbon capture pilot project that's currently in progress at Prairie State. The pilot is primarily funded by what folks like to consider too often as free taxpayer money coming from the U.S. Department of Energy here. There's some small piece of it that's being funded by ratepayers, but we don't know how much that is. It's expected that a full production construction of a carbon capture and storage project of this size plant is expected to cost well over $1 billion, and it'll also increase the operational cost. So who's going to bear the brunt of those costs? It's going to be Naperville and the Muni Co-op ratepayers who are going to bear the brunt of these capital and operational costs here. So that's the other piece that will come if that's the way that Prairie State decides to try to address this 45% reduction here. So I've done a whirlwind here through 3 topics: the Munis Co-op, the Munis, Naperville, the Naperville, IMEA, and Prairie State. And so here's the resource list that I've put together that has a copy of the slides, as well as some further things that you can go look at, including where we keep the board minutes and board records, the history files that we have of IMEA and Prairie State also here. So I ended up going a lot faster than I had hoped, but that's good because then we have more time, I think, to answer questions here. Okay. So Kathy, yeah. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I should mention that we have at least one person here from Winnetka, who's Winnetka is also part of IMEA. Liz Kunkel, I see, is here. So I guess that the first question is, do you have any thoughts about cooperating with other communities that are part of IMEA, or even like with NIMPA communities who are also part of PSEC? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think my thought from a citizen political pressure here is that it's important for us to try to reach other communities who can also express that political will to their city councils here, who effectively are the board of directors here. So I think that's an important step. I think it's also an important step to try to reach out to the other electric directors and the other city councils here. But not fear, but my belief is that those boards and those electric directors are already pretty much drinking the IMEA Kool-Aid here, and they're not going to be our allies and supporters here. So I can get away with saying that now as an independent outsider. Did that answer that question, Kathy?
So, but like the call to action, like the reason that you want to inform all of us about this and inform the other communities is to create political will, right? Isn't that
Absolutely.
kind of the goal here?
Yep. And so, you know, again, one of the things that we as CLEAN are trying to accomplish is to get our board of directors to act like a board of directors, right? I mean, we've not only outsourced the operation of IMEA, but we've also outsourced the oversight in many ways here. So no one is looking at those detailed reports. Why? Because we don't receive them. So what is the cost of operation of our assets? What are the plans for those assets? All those things that you would want to have if you're going to exercise some oversight, right? How do we compare how they're performing and what are our other options here? And those are all questions that you would want to answer as you try to lay a plan for the future here.
Yep. All right, I'm going to get to some of these questions. Jody, I see your hand up, but let me get to some of the chat and then we'll have you go, Jody. Chris asked, is Naperville excluded from other provisions of CEJA, such as the Building Energy Stretch Code? Do you know about that?
Not the stretch code, because the stretch code isn't part of the Public Utilities Act. So, you know, there are some pieces of CEJA is a huge omnibus piece of legislation, but anytime you hear it specified or related to public utilities, that's where you're going to run into the munis and co-ops are excluded. But stretch codes are not. That applies to everybody.
That's good, because if you go back to the graph I had, energy efficiency is one of the things that we got to tackle. So being able to do the stretch codes is going to help Naperville with that.
Yeah. Let me add to that. So Amanda Pankow is doing that presentation for the league tomorrow night. Amanda has been working on a nice piece of documentation that better clarifies what CEJA includes and excludes from a muni co-op standpoint. So I'm hopeful that she'll be able to offer that as a resource tomorrow night.
Yeah, and yeah, we're going to get to that, but I have a link to, if you aren't already signed up for that program tomorrow night.
Yeah, so that muni co-op fact sheet, I think, will help us in Naperville. So that ought to be one of the questions for her if she doesn't offer it up tomorrow night. Amanda, okay. You have it ready for us?
All right. Okay, Duncan asks, who are the other PSEC owners?
Well, as I mentioned, there are 3 in Illinois here, but the easiest thing to do is to Google the Prairie State Energy Campus website and look at the page that has the 9 owners. So 4 of them in Illinois that I mentioned, and then we have Indiana Municipal. Let's see if I can get them all. Indiana Municipal Power, Kentucky Municipal Power, Missouri, I forgot what the Missouri Municipal Power Group is called. There's Wabash Valley Power Alliance, and I'm missing one more, so I kind of fail on, yeah. The biggest one, American Municipal Power, which is headquartered in Ohio. They're the biggest one. So then we also had here in Illinois, NIMPA, IMEA, Prairie Power, and Southern Illinois Power.
All right.
I'll throw a link to the Prairie State website
that's we got it. Liz put that up already, so we're good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. All right, one more question from the chat, then Jody, your turn. So Bill Kale wants to know if you attended the secret November 2019 board meeting.
No, we weren't allowed. It was closed.
Yeah.
But we learned of it at the meeting before. And we felt that that was the meeting where contract extensions were actually going to be firmed up. We had no way to know. And that was at the NEST meeting around that same time. We agreed to write a memo, which Jody authored that memo to City Council. And we also gave, in addition, Bill read the memo. I preceded it with my own comments. But even though IMEA contract extensions were documented, we found them documented in the fiscal year 1920 IMEA plan, our Naperville leaders played dumb, like they knew of no plans for contract extensions. So that raises a lot of alarms in my head. Who was not telling us? Or is it that some in city knew and City Council didn't know? That, as I like to say, that lack of transparency just keeps on rearing its ugly head all over the place. And I hope that we can change that.
Jody?
I guess my question is more is for actually Bill and Liz. So Liz, thanks for coming. You too, Bill. I haven't spoken with you yet, but in your communities, is there any awareness of this issue or concern over this issue? Again, getting back to one of the things that council directed staff to investigate at the November 9th or 5th meeting, whatever that day was whether or to use Naperville's leadership role and use our voice to engage other communities in helping to encourage the transition to renewable energy. So it's back to the whole coalition building capacity. And it's not that things can't change at IMEA, but it's going to require the collaboration of members in order to do so. And so with Naperville's percentage that we own, correct me if I'm wrong here, Greg, but we need, is it 2 or 3 other municipalities to be on board with us and helping to, establish this as a directive for IMEA. So I don't know, I guess that's, it's like I would ask Liz and Bill, is this something there's support for in your community? And, is that something that you could potentially see as something, so Liz, I know you've got, your environmental group commission up there. Bill, I don't know if you are on a commission or anything, but is this something that you think we could potentially build momentum behind and get the community initiative going behind?
And the bill you're referencing, we've
Yes.
got a bunch of bills here today. Yeah, so certainly in the Fox Valley region, there will be a lot of initiative involved in this. I'm really not at liberty to say more at the moment.
Sure.
Yeah, Bill, if you know folks, especially in St. Charles, because they're the second largest owners of IMEA, so we'd love to talk to some folks.
Yeah, is this something you'd be willing to help us engage in, like,
Oh, absolutely.
the collaboration for? Fabulous.
And both Maureen and I have spoken to Liz, so hi Liz.
Hi. So I'm on our Environmental and Forestry Commission in Winnetka, and I'm also the founder of our local Go Green group. And so I can say with relative ease that those 2 groups are definitely supportive of the initiative. I can't say that the village as a whole, our village council, will be, but that's what we're working toward. Coincidentally, in Winnetka, we are just picking up the process of our 2040 comprehensive plan process. So just literally within the last couple of weeks, our Environmental Forestry Commission, or EFC, has been working on a list of priorities and short and long term and strategies and goals and things, working within the GRC2, the recently released Climate Action Plan, CEJA, all of it. So we're putting those together and recommending that our village council do some do more regarding IMEA, but we have no idea how that might play out. We have not begun that conversation at all, but we're definitely interested in it. And I also connected with Greg a couple years ago. Hi, Greg.
Hello.
What goes around comes around.
Yeah, I guess, Maureen, you didn't talk to Liz, but Maureen talked to,
Oh, Chuck. Probably
right.
Chuck. Chuck is the
Yes,
chair of our EFC. So, and I'll say real quick before I yield, I would let Greg, our Go Green group has just thought about educating Winnetka on even what it means to be a member of IMEA, and your presentation was so helpful with that. So I will definitely be following up with you to get some information that we can use to get some people up to speed in Winnetka. So thanks very much for that.
Okay.
Liz, thank you for
Glad-
coming.
Glad to help.
Yeah,
If I can just add a note here. So Graham had a question. Did somebody address that?
Oh, did I miss
As
one?
far as Naperville's potential liability exposure for environmental remediation for PSEC and Trimble. So that is our whole reason and motivation behind this effort, is because that's what we want to know. And that's what we're actually asking the city to investigate. And that's what city staff was asked to investigate at the November 5th council
Yeah,
meeting.
October 5th, yeah. Mhm,
Yeah, sorry.
mhm.
But they did not make a commitment to do that yet.
No,
Not
Yeah.
yet, no.
So,
that we know of.
yep. Transparency.
Yeah.
I may have said that a time or two here.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't want to
Right.
come off as too cryptic. It might have sounded as depressing on that. I'm also a member of Legal and Voters, State of Illinois, and we encourage people to join regional climate action plans, and we hope to take that throughout the entirety of the state, if not the entirety of the country. So this is kind of one of the test cases in the beginning for the league, working also where we can with the Mayor's Metropolitan Caucus, and certainly because it's a muni co-op issue, it's very distinctive compared to what happens in most places. But this is a problem all across the country, a lot of muni co-ops, not just in Illinois, but it's kind of a specific one to Illinois.
And actually, Bill is part of the league in Central Kane County, and they're co-sponsoring the program tomorrow night on CEJA. So there should be some more people over from that way for that program.
so Liz, if I might add one thing that maybe we should talk a little bit further about, in terms of a plan. I do think that this Vistra contract termination is stirring up the IMEA efforts to extend contracts, and that's something that all of us should be concerned about. Okay, especially given that there is no plan to address the coal-fired ownership here. So what we at CLEAN are considering is a campaign to face up to this contract extension issue here, and work with others to try to stop that.
Yep, understood.
All right, there's one more comment, and then we are gonna move on to the rest of the program. I did want to say that for this part of the program, we're going to have, each month we're going to have a speaker, and on our YouTube channel, we're going to have like a little educational playlist. So the part of this part of the presentation will be on our YouTube channel too, if anyone wants to share it with other people. And just the last comment from Graham here, as owners, it reads to me that we have basically an uncapped liability exposure unless there is some limit of liability language in our IMEA contract with PSEC.
So the our power supply contract is in our Nest directories. You can find that in there. You can also find a copy of the PSEC participation agreement here in one of those directories here, and you can look at that. Whether there's any further agreements, etc. here, again, that lack of transparency just jumps out all over the place. Howard might, if Howard is on, we should invite Howard Salk to maybe make a comment about that if he's willing.
Yeah, I'm on. Hey, Greg. So the way it works is that any environmental liability to the owners, which would include IMEA, can be passed through to the members of IMEA. So IMEA can bill its members, including Naperville, for all of the liabilities it incurs in connection with PSEC.
And again, the important thing is that liability will not end when the contract ends, because we are IMEA, right, Howard?
Yes, sir. You've taught me that.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Greg. I know that we all learned a lot tonight, and I saw you put your email in there. So if anyone wants to get in touch with Greg, that's there for you.
All right. Thank you again.
All right.